Darkcast Network, the light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Hey there, Ghoul Fiends. It's Ash from Creepy Tapas. If you know me, you know I love to spend countless hours browsing independent businesses, putting things in my shopping cart that I only buy once a year when I spend all of my money supporting all of your businesses. Well, I found the cutest little online shop on Etsy called Wick of the Wood. Wick of the Wood specializes in unique accent candles with an inventory that consists of one-of-a-kind handmade candles that can fit in a variety of spaces and aesthetics. Wick of the Wood always has their eye out for new candle molds, thrifted containers, and other inspiration. The idea that everyone can have a candle that fits whatever quirky space they need inspires Wick of the Wood to think outside the candle mold and make any idea you might have a reality. Since she was a little girl, the owner has always dreamt of having a little shop where she could sell her handmade items. Under the watchful eye of her dog, she lovingly hand makes each item, packages them, and mails them to you from Seattle, Washington. But you don't have to take it from me. Here are some testimonials from several happy Wick of the Wood customers. Susie says, 5 stars.
I've ordered from this shop, and every time it's an amazing experience. Everything smells amazing, and the packaging is always so cute and functional. This is my favorite candle shop.
Tandra also gives Wick of the Wood 5 stars.
These are so cool. I only burned 3, so I could keep one for show.
Another 5 stars from Dwar, who says,
the seller is so kind. Beautifully packaged. The candles smell and look amazing. Bought it for my bestie roomie, and she loves it. Thank you, and thank you for the freebies, too.
Ooh, freebies. Those are just a few of the amazing reviews over at Wick of the Wood. I ordered a few for Christmas, and I cannot wait to smell them and give them as gifts. Guess what you're getting for Christmas?
A
Wick
candle.
of the Wood. I'm especially excited about these adorable poison apple candles. They're so freaking adorable and spooky. I love it. You can check out Wick of the Wood at Etsy.com, shop Wick of the Wood. Follow Wick of the Wood on Twitter at Wick of the Wood. Wick of the Wood. Really neat candles. Check them out. Wick of the Wood. You really should. They're on Etsy. Hey, hey, hey.
Give them a sniff.
Let's take a pause for the peculiar. Welcome to a place where we deconstruct conspiracy theories. We unwind unsolved mysteries, break down the bizarre, and discuss all things horror. Hey guys, it's Liz. I'm a career horror fanatic obsessed with the darker side of things. I've been a writer my whole life, and ever since I realized I drew inspiration from the unexplainable, my infatuation was born. The macabre is a way of life for me. I spend my days researching weird and creepy things to inspire my next short story. Join me each week as we take a pause for the peculiar.
Hi there. No disclaimers. You knew what you were getting into when you started listening. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. The sweetest and the oddest thing happened to me at the grocery store the other day. There was this little old lady behind me in line, and when I started getting rung up, she tried to pay for my groceries. I couldn't possibly let her. My total came up to $140. But I did thank her repeatedly and told her how sweet she was. She even saw the 12-pack of beer I was buying my neighbor who came over and blew all the leaves off my yard. I just wanted to share that because normally during the holidays, people get asshole-ish, and she just kind of renewed some faith in people for me. So did my neighbor. There is some good in the world still, my Rainbow Warriors. And then I received a scathing, angry post on one of my YouTube episodes from a woman who said she's a mega supporter. She also claimed to be a huge supporter of the LGBTQ community. Well, congratulations to her, but she is one of very few. Then she goes on to tell me because I made a comment about if you're a mega supporter, don't listen to this. Then she goes on to tell me that I'm no better than cowardly murderers of Barry Winchell and Matthew Shepard. What a bitch! You don't know me, and don't pretend to think you do when you make comparisons like that. I'm not a killer. I'm not hateful. What I am is I'm angry. Angry at most MAGA supporters for their incredible lack of intelligence when they go and support someone who's chock full of hate. This is my forum, and if I wish to state my opinion, I will. You can disagree with me, that's your right. But to put me in a class with heinous murderers, that's just not cool. She did make a valid point on one thing. She said that I don't want to be stereotyped, and neither did she as a MAGA supporter. Fair. I guess there are a few out there that are not hateful to my community, and not racist. But those people are very few and far between. So, bye-bye, bitch. Don't let my rainbow door smack you in the ass on your way out. And that's kinda why I haven't felt like recording lately. Find me on the socials. Just about everywhere is Rainbow Crimes and Darkcast Network. Join me on Patreon. At the $5 unicorn level, you can get ad-free episodes, early release episodes, and one extra episode a month not heard here on the regular show, while we take our unicorns out of the Seabreeze stables and go for a ride. What? You don't have a unicorn? Well, I will name one for you if you join. Hopefully I'll be able to send out some other perks soon as well. I'll leave a Patreon link in the show notes. And thank you to those who are my Patreon supporters. You guys rock. There's just one more thing I wanted to tell you about before starting this episode's listener's suggested case. Apparently, a man named Robert Rimmer in the UK is wanted for questioning by the police on something drug-related, but it was a non-violent crime. He also isn't too tough on the eyes. When the police posted this on social media, comments were pretty funny. Both women and gay men decided to respond. One said, "If I find him, I won't be giving him back." Another said, "Look at him. If I see him, I'm going to make a citizen's arrest and handcuff him to my bed." Someone said, "My back door's unlocked, hun. Let's see if you live up to your name, Rimmer." And finally, someone said, "I've got a safe place he can bury himself in." Apparently, the wanted post received over 4,000 comments, pretty much like those. This article gave me a laugh out loud moment for sure. Now let's get into our case. In the very back of the closet were the snowshoes, several board games with box lids taped in the corners to hold it together, and some musty old raincoats lay, sat 39-year-old Billy Jack Gaither. He sat so far back in the closet, he was pretty much invisible, much like these other items. Nah, I'm just messing with you. He wasn't really sitting in the closet. The closet is always a metaphor for the LGBTQ peeps. And metaphorically speaking, Billy Jack spent most of his 39 years in that closet. He was a cautious man. He didn't need to call any attention to himself in a small town of Sylacauga, Alabama. It was a kind of place where everyone knew each other by name, and not one person in this little town was openly gay. The closest big city is Birmingham, about an hour away. Billy Jack could have left to Birmingham. He could have happily lived his truth in Birmingham, the big city where no one knew him. But he chose to stick to his little town because that's where his family lived. His parents weren't in the best of health. He stayed to take care of them while he worked as a computer operator at Russell Athletic Apparel. Billy Jack had several siblings, but it was he who was the caretaker. Family was everything to him. It always had been since he was a little kid. He wasn't big on bullies either. He had a few of his own encounters with bullies at times, and he wasn't afraid to confront them if they picked on him. Even when he'd catch his siblings bullying someone, he'd put a stop to it. Billy Jack wasn't tough, but he wasn't soft either. He was easygoing. Unless you ruffled his feathers, then you better look out. Religion and church are a huge deal for most all residents in this little town. Billy Jack and his family were faithful churchgoers. Being a southern state in the Bible Belt, I imagine most are fire and brimstone type churches where LGBTQ are nothing but sinners. Today, there are 73 churches in this little town, if that tells you anything about the town's love of religion. And I won't say the little town's love of God. If it were a love of God, people from all walks of life would be accepted and not shunned for the color of their skin or whom they choose to love, and LGBTQ people wouldn't be fearful to be themselves. Billy Jack wouldn't have had to live in his metaphoric closet if his family's religion would have been accepting of him. I think that's my biggest beef with organized religions. The people who run the show, ministers, pastors, deacons, bishops, preachers, grand poobahs, they're all just regular people who interpret their fictional book of the Bible how they want to read it, and oftentimes their interpretation is hateful. Yet they talk about how God is loving everyone, and God doesn't make mistakes. It can be just a bunch of hypocritical bullshit. But Billy Jack would never complain. He would never utter a single syllable about his truth to his parents. His dad, sickly or not, was the kind of man who needed his boys to be manly men. He was not a horrible father. His philosophy on sons was a generational, if not religious value he held. Had Billy Jack felt able to come out to his parents? I'm almost positive it would have been tough for them to accept, but with the closeness of the family, I believe that in time his truth would have been accepted, and they would have still loved him no matter what. But in his 39 years, Billy Jack lived his truth in secret. He dated women, and he tried really hard to make it work. His brother Ricky once asked him if he was gay. He assured Billy Jack it wouldn't change anything between them if he were. Billy Jack said, "I'm not gay. I might be bisexual, though." His sister Kathy, who actually did come out as a lesbian, even told Billy Jack she knew he was gay. He denied it, but she persisted and told him it was fine. Just don't push it on anyone and be respectful of Mom and Dad, but live for you and do what makes you happy. Billy Jack didn't heed his sister's advice. He just couldn't upset or disappoint his parents. So basically, this is how Billy Jack lived his life. He'd make sure his folks had everything they needed for the day before leaving for work in the morning. He'd go to work. Then he'd come home and be with his folks in his spare time. Sometimes people he considered friends would ask him for a ride somewhere, and Billy Jack was happy to drive his friends. Billy Jack was a good person with a really good heart. He was a people pleaser, but on some nights if he was feeling particularly festive and needed to be himself, he most likely would take a drive into Birmingham, or even more commonly, he'd go out of state to Atlanta, Georgia, where no one knew him, and he'd go to a gay club. But I believe those trips were sparse. The trip to Atlanta was about 2.5 hours. Occasionally, Billy Jack would visit a regular bar in his town called Tavern. When Billy Jack went to Tavern, he'd go for a drink and play pool with people he considered friends. This was the happening nightlife for this small town. A waitress at Tavern recalled a night that Billy Jack was there and a very flamboyant visitor to their town had walked in. Billy Jack admonished the visitor and told him the way he was dressed and acting wasn't appropriate for around there. In hindsight, Billy Jack might have saved this visitor's life, or at very least, saved the visitor from getting beaten up. On February 19, 1999, Billy Jack was asked by a guy named Steve Mullins for a ride to the tavern. Billy Jack would often give 25-year-old Stephen rides places. He considered Stephen a friend, although he didn't really know him all that well. But this night, Stephen had another friend with him, 21-year-old Charles Butler. Charles and Billy Jack didn't know each other at all. They may have seen each other before, but they had never communicated. Billy Jack drove the three of them to Tavern to get some drinks and play pool. After a while, Stephen and Charles convinced Billy Jack to leave Tavern, and they drove to a local boat launch. Once all three men were out of the car, Stephen found an axe handle and he began to beat Billy Jack. Charles just stood by and watched, at first, and then he joined in. The two younger men dragged Billy Jack to the trunk of the car and they tossed him in. They got back into Billy Jack's car and they drove to a creek. The younger men opened the trunk and they pulled Billy Jack out. Billy Jack tried to run from his attackers, but he didn't get very far. They caught him and they started to beat on him again. Stephen slit Billy Jack's throat. There were 2 old tires nearby. Stephen found a can that had kerosene in it. He poured the kerosene onto the tires to accelerate a fire. When the flames were hot enough, Stephen and Charles threw Billy Jack's body into the blaze. Days went by and Billy Jack was nowhere to be found. His parents needed him. His job was worried when he didn't show up. Feeling this overwhelming guilt about what they had done, the younger of the 2 attackers, Charles, he turned himself into law enforcement, and then he ratted out Stephen Mullins as well. When Stephen was picked up, he admitted to killing Billy Jack. Stephen and Charles' stories would change several times before the actual trial. The first story was that Billy Jack had hit on Stephen a week ago, and Stephen wasn't gay, so he had a little score to settle. The next story was Billy Jack wanted to leave tavern to go have a threesome with Stephen and Charles. Finally, the last story. Billy Jack was hitting on Charles the night they killed him. But whichever story they went with, gay panic was their choice of defense. As of current day, Alabama has 0 laws protecting LGBTQ+ people. There are no laws banning gay panic defense. There are, however, laws denying trans people gender reassignment surgeries, and even laws that young trans people are not allowed to use bathrooms of the gender they identify with. Alabama has even modified a version of Florida's Don't Say Gay law. It truly makes me wonder if Alabama, Florida, and these other homophobic leaders of these states will ever progress. Don't they want to see their states out of the dark ages? Luckily, the jurors could see past the gay panic defense. The prosecutors convinced the jury the plan to kill Billy Jack had been in the making for 2 weeks, making the crime a first-degree murder charge. I mean, that makes sense. How did Stephen just happen to find an axe handle laying around to beat Billy Jack with? Or a gas can, or even the tires, for that matter? Both men would be found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Billy Jack's murder and media attention to it called for stricter laws in Alabama to protect their LGBTQ citizens. But as I mentioned before, there really has been no change in the past 23 years since Billy Jack's murder in Alabama. Even then President Bill Clinton addressed Billy Jack's murder, and he pleaded for stronger laws protecting the LGBTQ. Some states were proactive and quick to make such laws as these, but sadly, in the Bible Belt states, they're still lagging. But wait, this case isn't entirely over. Just days after the 20-year anniversary of Stephen Mullins killing Billy Jack, that bitch Karma, she visited him in prison. Karma by the way of another inmate named Christopher Jones. Christopher stabbed Stephen in his cell. Stephen was airlifted to a hospital where he died 2 days later. And while I hate to wish death on anyone, Karma isn't as selective as I am. Rest in power, Billy Jack. Our true crime quickie comes to us from a province in South Africa.
We are all humans. Keep pushing, keep fighting for those equality rights.
These are the words from LGBTQ activist 23-year-old Landakule Chale, who went by Lindo C. Lindo was a talented musical artist who had his young life yanked from him. Lindo was also a student, and he was trying hard to make something of himself. He was being raised by his aunt, who was much more like a loving mother to him. She even, in fact, referred to him as her son. Lindo's murder was the third in 2 months of an LGBTQ person in South Africa this year. Lindo's murder was the third in just a few months of an LGBTQ person in South Africa during the dates of December 2019 and February 2020. A 25-year-old lesbian named Portia Simpiwe Mshweni was murdered and mutilated, and a 28-year-old trans activist, Nair Mafela, was found decomposing in their rented room. No arrests were made for either of those two murders. On February 6, 2020, Lindo was simply on his way to the butcher's market in Durban to get some fresh meat. A 32-year-old man who was a passenger in a taxi cab was driving by Lindo. He made his taxi driver stop in a hurry. He got out of the cab, followed Lindo into the butcher's shop, grabbed a butcher's knife, and stabbed Lindo 21 times. As he was being stabbed, Lindo asked the man why he was doing this. Lindo pleaded for his life, but his attacker just continued. The attack was so savage, the killer left the knife in Lindo's eye socket. Oh, there were witnesses there. Witnesses who just watched it all go down. No one tried to help Lindo. Although Lindo did not know his attacker, it's thought by Lindo's family and friends the attacker knew Lindo and did not approve of his LGBTQ lifestyle, which would make this a definite hate crime. His attacker, whose name I'm gonna butcher, but the guy's an asshole, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. His name is Mvuisi Muguda, was arrested and tried. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for killing Lindo. Rest in power, Lindo. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay. Unless you're a murderer. And be sure to check out Darkcast Network's Holiday Double Feature. Part 1 of the stories are those that are on the naughty list. And the second part will be stories on the nice list. My story this year is on the nice list, and it's the very last story of the episode, part 2. I hope you'll check them out. It's our gift to our listeners. Happy holidays, everyone.